Hello everybody, welcome to another Darkest Dungeon mod overview. My name is ElementFive, and today we're taking a look at a brand new modded class called the Keeper. The Keeper is developed by Shay, with special credit to Acero Steel, who came up with the original Condena Vestal skin, which was also used for the Condena mod class, the class developed by Seta Nagato. The mod is also developed in conjunction with Red Dye, Menlo, Von Krolok, Rothag, Soul Smile, Tarot, and Ebony Betty. The Keeper is a very interesting kind of healer support class that is dark, twisted, gory, and it actually comes with a disclaimer here on the Steam page, which I should bring up at the beginning of this video, warning people that this mod features gore, body horror, and mild nudity, as a couple of the animations here you'll see have the character topless. But it's not really a feature of the class. Really, the gore is the feature of this class because inside the Keeper is a living eldritch entity.
Impressive.
Now, I've been playing with the beta version of this class for about the last week, really having a lot of fun with it and trying to just nail down exactly how to use it correctly. The Keeper is a religious character, originally named Christabel, who refuses to go to the brothel for stress relief, uses the Altar of Light district to gain bonuses like other religious classes do. She brings one laudanum as a provision into dungeons, and we'll explain why that is here in a bit. She cannot be grouped with other keepers. When she lands a crit, she actually activates a riposte, which is quite interesting. But I think in basic concept, this is a support class that is kind of oriented around how much stress it has taken. It is a bit of a stress sponge, and if the stress starts to ramp, her abilities overall will become a lot more powerful, especially in the case of her damage output. So before we get into all of that and how she works, let's talk about her backstory here. Beginning with the description on Steam. A waif cursed with a monstrous burden, the Keeper is host to an otherworldly horror beneath her skin. She bends the creature to the light's will in combat, sacrificing herself for the good of her allies and becoming all stronger for it. However, should she be pushed to her limits, it will seize control. And we get a nice comic strip here done by Von Krolok that begins up here in this first frame as we see a woman huddled over in despair outside in the rain in a dark alleyway. And we see two individuals leaving some sort of a bar or establishment, and they take note of her. We get a close-up shot here of Christabel as she's crying, and we realize now that she's actually in deep thought, thinking about a sort of flashback to a time when she was a nun in a previous life and had fallen in love. The two gentlemen come over to her to make sure she's okay, and at that very moment, the eldritch being inside of Christabel breaks free, killing both of the men, and we see that the entire time she's been deep in thought, thinking about that flashback to when she fell in love and was ultimately tricked and betrayed by her husband into some sort of a dark ritual. Then she comes out of it, seeing now that two of these men have been there to help her and were killed by the eldritch being inside her, that she lost control of it with this really excellent sort of affliction crown here made out of the blood in the back. And according to Shay, Christabel was a nun in a former life who fell deeply in love with a man, so much so that she renounced her vows and ran away with him. Unfortunately for her, though, the whole thing was a ruse. Her lover was a prominent member of a cult, manipulating her the entire time. Eventually, she was abducted and used as the sort of focal point for a ritual, turned into the host of an eldritch creature living inside her. Now, while she's usually the one in control, she's learned to keep the creature in check. Sometimes, however, she suffers lapses, loses control of the creature, and all hell breaks loose, as we see has happened here in this dark alleyway. It was during one of those lapses that she found herself in the hamlet as the creature sensed something dark stirring under the manor. So in both aesthetic and backstory, this is a class that really feels like it pulls from different sources. It's really interesting in the sense that it's definitely kind of got that Vestal appeal. It was a nun in a former life, and there's some use of Light's magic here in the way that she heals and does things, but she's also got that eldritch beast inside of her, and that feels a little bit more like some of the occultists' stuff, and the very tug of war between those two entities feels a little bit like Marvin Sayo's Sisters, that involves a lot of stress management. Now, before we go into each one of her abilities, let's just do what we always do and take a look at the base stats here. Max HP 25. Now, this is actually pretty decent HP. I think this is comparable, but maybe slightly higher than a Seeker Vestal would be, this being an Apprentice Keeper. 5 dodge, which is affected by the fact that we have Luminous. 0 prot, 5 speed, 4 base, but we're getting +1 and also -1 here from slow reflexes. 0 accuracy, 5 crit, and a 4 to 8 damage range. So I think for the most part, fairly comparable to what a Vestal looks like. 24, 5, 5, 4 to 8, crit 1, etc. Now, in terms of resistances, nothing really too interesting, other than obviously this stun percentage here at 70% standing out, 50% base, but plus 10% for the resolve level, and then also another 10%, as I said just a minute ago, getting a benefit from the Altar of Light here like other religious characters, so plus 10% stun resist and 10% healing skills. Probably the only other really significant consideration in terms of her resistances is the low bleed resist here, just because we take note of the fact that a couple of her abilities have a chance to bleed herself. Now, before we jump into each individual ability here, let me just talk about her flexibility for a second. This is a really flexible class in terms of positioning, and if we just mouse over the first ability and you see these positional indicators at the top here, the 3 white circles and the 3 red circles, right? So this ability can be used in the first 3 positions, this in all positions, back 3, all positions, back 3, and all positions. So for the most part, she plays very well and completely flexibly from position 2 or 3, and probably 3 more appropriately. And so that just makes her, I think, more flexible than a Vestal, and again, sort of feeling a little bit more like an occultist in that regard. But let's jump into her first ability here, which is Writhe, which is her only melee attack. This can be used from position 1, 2, or 3. It attacks enemies in position 1, 2, or 3. As an accuracy base 85, minus 25% damage modifier, plus 4% crit modifier. It will bleed an enemy for 1/3, and an extra 20% bleed chance per 25 stress, up to 75 stress max. And you're going to see this at the bottom of every ability she has here, some form of self plus stress, in this case +3. So we have an interesting bleed ability here, which can be used from rank 3 and even attack rank 3. So it has some pretty great range. And I think at the higher level, this bleed can get pretty crazy, especially in consideration with how much stress she's built. Next then is Convalescence. Can be used in any position. This is her self-heal. She heals herself with an HOT 4/1 and de-stresses herself -6 with an included 1/3 chance to clear Horrified. So according to Shay, this is a mandatory ability to take along with any build that you bring, primarily because this is the only way that she can heal herself, but also this is sort of how you control for her stress ramp. Next in the kit then is her primary healing ability, which is Rebirth. Rebirth can be used in position 2, 3, or 4. It heals another target for 10% of their max HP. You get a bonus 10% healing done per 25 stress that the keeper has, at the cost of a 70% chance to bleed herself 1/3 and add +3 stress. So again, it is not a direct heal, it is not a heal over time, it is based on the maximum HP of a character. So this is really effective when you consider using this on a tank or something with a very high HP pool, as you're just going to get more efficacy out of it. And the fact that she bleeds herself and sort of sacrifices herself is a common theme here, and that's where, again, Convalescence is going to be kind of nice to counter that as you move forward. So next then is one of her crowd control abilities called Daemon's Yoke. Can be used in position 2, 3, or 4. Targets enemies in 1, 2, or 3. It's a ranged attack with accuracy base 95. minus 66% damage modifier, plus 3% crit chance, has an 80% chance to stun, and an extra 20% stun chance per, again, 25 stress. Stresses herself out plus 3 and also debuffs the enemy target minus 10 dodge and adds a 20% damage received bonus from using her bleed attack, which is called Writhe.
Impressive.
Next in her kit then is Phantom Whale. Phantom Whale can be used in any position. You target a friendly hero and you give them plus 6 stress. She gives herself plus 3 stress, but it buffs that target hero with 75% damage reflection and a debuff of a random target chance 15% of the time. So essentially what's happening here is you are buffing another hero of your party 75% damage reflection. So if that hero is to be hit by an enemy for 4 damage, that enemy will then take 3 damage back, right? It's also debuffing that friendly hero for random target chance 15% of the time. So 15% of the time, who you intend to attack with that hero will not be the case, and at the cost of a little stress. Now, before I show you the clip on this, just take note, this stacks with riposte. It obviously doesn't work like riposte, because you can riposte if you dodge an attack. You actually have to take damage if you want to use damage reflection, which is worth considering. But you'll see in the clip here that I'm able to stack damage reflection on Dismas when he has riposte. You'll see the riposte damage and the reflection. So next is one of the most interesting abilities out of the Keeper's kit called Cacophony. A ranged attack which can be used in position 2, 3, or 4. It attacks all enemies, accuracy base 90, minus 75% damage modifier, minus 3% crit modifier, plus 33% damage done per 25 stress. And, this is an important piece here, it always crits versus stunned enemies. It also stresses herself out plus 3, which we're used to, but it also debuffed the enemy target minus 8% stun resist. And as you'll see in the clip here, when we do land that crit, it also activates her riposte. So, the ability then for her to synergize with the Plague Doctor, the Hellion, or other stun-oriented classes becomes much greater and much more interesting. And at the right time, this can deal a ton of damage, and especially if you've ramped her stress up pretty high.
A devastating blow.
So that brings us to the last ability in the Keeper's kit, which is Sacrifice. Sacrifice can be used in any position. It heals the party 2-2, kind of like a Vestal's AoE heal. It guards all allies, and it has a massive cooldown of 3 rounds, and it comes at the price of a 70% base chance to bleed herself 2/3, as well as horrify herself 5/3, which is in part why she comes on the party with Laudanum. So now that we've gone over her abilities, let's just talk about general strategy, how to group her, and how to build a kit for a dungeon to make her effective. And let's just know that the starting point is going to be taking Convalescence with you no matter what you do. Again, because this is the only way for her to heal herself, but also, more importantly, this is how you really effectively control her stress ramp. You're going to be using her throughout a dungeon. All of her abilities are going to be giving herself plus stress, right? And that's going to empower her healing output, her damage output, etc., even her stun ability. So, but at the same time, you need to prevent her from hitting affliction as much as possible because she has a custom guaranteed affliction called Tormented, which is basically the Eldritch Beast inside her taking over, breaking free spewing a bunch of eldritch nonsense and stressing out the rest of your party members or even attacking them. So we're going to start with Convalescence, and then we're probably going to take Rebirth, given that this is a healing and support class for the most part, and this is her primary heal. Now, the fact that this is a percentage-based heal ability means that it's going to be more effective with high HP tanky classes, and I think that's the way to think about this class. She goes really well with tanks in combination with something like Phantom Whale. So if you got a Leper up front, a Thrall, maybe a Man-at-Arms, somebody who's going to be taking damage, doesn't really have the dodge, but they have the high HP. Not only can you give that character damage reflection, but you're going to be healing them more effectively also. So on top of that, then you could bring Daemon's Yoke and add some stun to the group, and that will definitely be effective. You could also, swap in Sacrifice, so you just have that ability to really guard and heal the group if you really need to. And that's really the way that I think about kitting her here. We're going to be taking both of these. For the most part, she can be a standalone healer. If we're going into a bleed dungeon, something like the Wield or the Warrens, Writhe is going to be quite nice. If we're using something like Yoke and adding in some stuns to the party, well, this is also buffing the damage of Writhe. So now that's a fairly great combination for being in the Wield or the Warrens, for example. On the other hand, maybe you've got somebody who does stuns in the party, right? Now it's time to throw Cacophony down on top of those stuns, get the guaranteed crit, activate her riposte, and really punish something like Brigands or AoE classes, something that's going to guarantee you're going to get a nice hit with that powerful riposte damage. So the last thing worth really pointing out then before we move on is just the significance of Sacrifice here. Sacrifice is a very interesting ability, again, because it is an AoE heal, kind of like a Vestal's heal, and it can actually do some fairly decent output if you get some crits on it. The fact that it guards all allies is so rare, and I'm so glad that it has a big cooldown to it. And my original thought was, well, you can just kind of take advantage of this at the end of combat where the cooldown doesn't really matter and you just get a nice AoE heal. But it does come with this punishment at the bottom here, the bleed 2/3, which would suck to walk out of a combat through halls with that bleed on you, and the stress 5/3. However, if you want to kind of ramp up her stress quicker and make her abilities more powerful, this is kind of an effective way to do that then. In the combat with a Sacrifice party heal and walk out of there with a stress 5/3 and start to ramp up her stress. But I think what's most interesting about this ability, though, is how you can be creative with it. Are you just using it to basically do an AoE heal at the cost of maybe her taking on a ton of damage? Are you trying to prevent somebody who's been marked by spiders from just getting, chain crit one after another? Or are you doing something like casting Phantom Whale on herself with 75% damage reflection, essentially giving her kind of a soft riposte, and then guarding everybody and guaranteeing that you're going to be dealing damage back to all the damage that lands on her? The choice is really up to you, and I think ultimately there's a lot of ways to experiment with this ability and feel it out yourself. Now, in terms of her camping abilities, we have 4 unique camping abilities for the Keeper, which begins with Baneful Pact. A time cost 3, one companion gets 25% damage bonus for the next 4 battles, but loses 20% max HP for the next 4 battles and gets 5 stress. But I think this is interestingly paired with Martyr's Touch, a time cost 4, self-only bleed 1 over next 12 rounds, so a pretty lengthy bleed there, but one companion heals 25% HP, gets a bonus 25% max HP for the next 4 battles, and remove mortality debuff. So a pretty nice way to bring somebody right back into health, remove the mortality debuffs at the cost of sort of bleeding herself. Now again, if you combo that with Baneful Pact here, you get that minus 20% max HP here for trade for the 25% damage, but you can just herbs off that minus 20% max HP, and now you've got a character that has a really nice damage output and a really sizable health pool. The next ability in her camping kit is probably her most interesting, which is Self-Exorcism. Time cost 3, self-only minus 25 stress, and if afflicted, another minus 25 stress. Of course, a Self-Exorcism kind of spooky, so for other religious characters, plus 10 stress, and if not religious, just a coin flip on that 10 stress. So this is an interesting way to sort of bring her back down from, too much of a stress ramp. Ostensibly minus 50 stress if you've gotten her afflicted, which could be helpful. And again, most people don't realize that you can actually bring somebody out of affliction if you get their stress level all the way back down to 0 and reset. And you could ostensibly do that with Convalescence if you were able to kind of stall enough and just get enough of these in. So finally then, in her camping kit is Lonesome Communion. Time cost 3, self only plus 15% prot for the next 4 battles, and again minus 10 stress. A nice way to kind of bring her stress ramp down. So 15% prot if especially you're thinking you might be using Sacrifice, or you're just going to be moving into a boss fight or some sort of a fight where she's going to be taking a sizable amount of damage. Now in terms of trinketing the Keeper, the class comes with 8 specific trinkets, 2 common, 1 uncommon, a rare, a very rare, 2 Crimson Court, and 1 Color of Madness, which we'll take a look at in a second here. But I think we can start off by just talking about healing. If we take a look at the Recovery Charm, something that has plus healing received on it is actually going to be a worthwhile consideration, because Convalescence has that plus 4/1 attached to it. So Recovery Charm plus healing received is going to make that a more impactful, more interesting heal. However, in terms of her healing output, something like Junia's Head is probably worthwhile. You have to be careful, of course, about that stress received, because every time you use any of her abilities, she's going to be ramping her own stress. So just like Marvin Sayo's sister's class, adding that plus stress received can be very punishing and kind of get out of control quick. I suppose if you're going to do a shorter dungeon and you want to ramp that stress higher quicker, this could really help you get there. Ultimately, I think you just have to be kind of careful with that. And if we move over to the Nomad Wagon here and we take a look at her Color of Madness trinket, which is the Ephemeral Wreath, you get plus 8 dodge, another 8 dodge if her HP is below 50%, another 8 if stress is above 50, another 8 when she's guarding, which means when she uses Sacrifice, plus 50% guard duration, and 50% damage reflection. So the Ephemeral Wreath making her an amazing dodge tank whenever she uses Sacrifice. So you can definitely have a lot of fun, and according to Shay, it's really worth seeking out her Crimson Court trinkets and playing with this one and using her as a powerful dodge tank and just coming up with any sort of combinations you can. Big congratulations to Shay and the entire team behind this one. This definitely feels like one of the darkest classes we have encountered in Darkest Dungeon. It is gory, it is kind of in your face, but the better you get at managing her stress and the more you start to understand her abilities, the more you can really come up with some fun combinations. And I think that's what makes a lot of classes really great. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more mod overviews and everything else Darkest Dungeon. And let me know in the comments section below what you think about this class. And don't forget to join us on Twitch at twitch.tv/ElementFive as we're back to our new streaming schedule, getting our butts kicked in our modded only Blood Moon run, which has been a lot of fun. Thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.